Kia ora koutou, no mai, haere mai, aku mihi. Welcome to the museum and welcome to the Mittens Expawsē Q&A with Silvio. Silvio here.
Good afternoon, everyone.
This is Tom over here. I'm Jilly, and Tom's just going to be videoing the event so that we can upload it for all of those folks that are Mittens fans but can't be here today. So, enough about me. Moving on to Silvio. How we're going to run today is we're going to do Q&A for half an hour. The first bit will be questions that we've got from the Wondrous Adventures of Mittens Facebook group, and then we'll spend the last 10 minutes or so taking questions from this lovely audience here. So if you've got some questions, put your hand up a little bit later and we'll take some questions from you. So, Silvio, Mittens' dad, his guardian, his collector from strange places around town. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, and thanks very much for coming along. It's great to see the community that Mittens has helped create, and good to see the positivity in the room.
Great. Let's kick into it. First question from the Facebook group is, why did you choose Turkish Angoras for your breed of cat? And tell us a little bit about how you came to get Mittens and Latte.
Sure. So it's fair to say I've always had cats. I had cats as a young child growing up. I used to live in Amsterdam at the time. And kind of when I was growing up and a teenager, I didn't have pets in my home because you were flatting, etc. But when my now wife and I, we kind of met and we first bought a place together in Auckland at the time, one of the things for us is, a house isn't really a home without a pet. So, I was very much keen, and my wife was maybe a bit more nervous about pets because she was more of a dog person. And I said, well, look, I'm keen to get a cat. So, you can imagine how that conversation went. I was persuasive enough. So, look, in terms of the Turkish Angora breed, why Turkish Angoras? I looked online in terms of breeders and types of cats, and I'd had a variety of different types of cats as a child, or my family members in Holland did, and I really liked both the kind of the intelligence and the look of Turkish Angoras. They're very intelligent animals. They have magnificent tails, as I'm sure many of you know. And so how did I get to have Mittens? Well, I had some exchanges with a breeder who was based out of the Hawke's Bay, and one day I went to an apartment in Ponsonby to go and collect Mittens, which was obviously very exciting for me. Actually, when I went into the apartment block there, it was an apartment block with wooden floors, and in the room next door there were about 7 or so kittens that were in that litter. You can hear all these little cats skitching around because they were also going to other people's homes. And as soon as I opened the door, this little cat came running out to me and started playing with my shoelaces. And that actually happened to be Mittens, even though, so I'd kind of picked him online, but he immediately came running at me. So I knew from that moment we'd have a special bond together.
So, next question. Where is Mittens' favourite snuggle spot at home?
Like most cats, they have several. Generally not in any furniture or things that you buy for them. It is usually somewhere in the sun. One of his favourite places is actually, we have a spare bedroom that gets a lot of sun, and it's got a very fluffy duvet that he likes to sleep on lying in the sun. The other ones are windowsills, or actually on piles of washing sometimes. It's kind of very, very cosy, especially clean piles of washing, of course. And he leaves behind a little bit of fur when he does so.
What are Mittens' grooming rituals, and how do you deal with his dirty paws after all of that wandering?
Yeah. Now this is a very, very common question, I must say, early on when I had Mittens, I did try and bath him a few times. Now, anyone who has tried to bath a cat will know that generally you come off second best, and he didn't like that at all. It's interesting, kind of when you look at his fur. So Turkish Angora cats have very long hair, but also shorter undercoat. So he doesn't actually get as knotted as a fur as some other cats, that you might have. So One of the bits of research I actually did before I did get Mittens is there's a book on 101 different things about cats, and it talked about kind of the grooming rituals of different ones. So Turkish Angoras do require some grooming, but not as much as you might think, given the fur. Occasionally he does come home a bit dirty, and I wash his paws a bit with a cloth, but nothing more than that. The rest he really takes care of himself. He does have a brush, which you can see in the display box over there, or not that we use that one at the moment, obviously it's in here, but so he does get brushed a reasonable amount.
A slightly more serious question. What has Mittens and his popularity taught you about life?
Well, quite a few things, I suppose. One, it's taught me how things can go viral. This is certainly nothing I ever expected. And in fact, I've said this before, but I didn't set up the Facebook page. Actually, the way the Facebook page came about was actually by a lovely lady called Sam at the SPCA, who I've met, several times, and she set up the Facebook page so that people can keep track of where he was, and that people didn't need to worry about him as a cat wandering around. So what has that taught me? Well, one, it's taught me that I can get calls at random times of day from various media outlets saying, "Hey, is this your cat? We'd like to talk to you about it." The other thing, perhaps on a slightly more serious note, it's also really kind of brought to the forefront, I think, for me, the role that animals play in people's mental health, and how a pet can really help people in difficult times, or when they're having a crappy day, and they see a pet or a cat, or in this case Mittens, and it just brings a smile to their face. So there's a really kind of positive message, I think, in that. It's interesting, talking to Ross at the SPCA, she's the general manager there. Their adoption rates of animals went through the roof after lockdown. They ran out of cats, and I think that was a reflection, by people, spending more time at home and actually realising, what's important, what helps my house become a home, and the roles that animals play in that. So, I think that's a really important part of it. The other thing I would say is, looking at you all here today, and kind of having been through some of the experiences over the last 6 months, is, kind of the social bridging, and Mittens doesn't judge, what kind of background you come from or anything like that. He's willing to talk to everyone as long as he's, in the right mood and whatever else. And it's really amazing to see how, that kind of connection in communities and the social bridging that's occurred, all, through one cat. But in reality, everyone's pet at their home plays an important role like that. Mittens just happens to wander around a bit further and got a bit famous.
Latte. Are Latte and Lucifer one and the same? Tell us more.
Now, this is another question I do get asked frequently, and there's actually an interesting backstory to this. So the answer, first of all, is yes, they are one and the same. When we first got Latte, and Latte's a year younger than Mittens, we wanted him to have a play friend at home. And Latte was actually extremely naughty as a young cat. He would jump up into the shelves, knock glasses down onto the floor, break bowls, etc. And from that, that's where his initial name, I suppose, Lucifer, came from. As he's matured, he's he's a really home cat. He doesn't go far. I mean, you'll have seen that he doesn't kind of follow Mittens around kind of more than 50 metres from home. And he's a real snuggly cat. So in some ways, Latte is my wife's cat. And snuggles at home and helps her. She does lots of cake baking, and Mittens is kind of more, I don't know, my cat. It's not really my cat, but he's kind of had a closer bond with me. So they are one and the same.
Can you tell us some of the most unusual places that Mittens goes?
Where to start with this one? So I'm also conscious there's a few young kids in the room, so some places might not be mentioned, but he literally goes to wherever he can that has an open door or an open window. Some of the more interesting places he's been to, he had a favourite spot in the back of Whitcoulls. So Whitcoulls, Cuba Street, actually has a kind of a, almost not quite secret, but a kind of a special staff room at the back where the staff can read books. And one of the things that he would sometimes do when he'd had a big night is hold up there for the day. Other interesting places, kind of some window displays. I had an interesting chat with a lady at Glassons once when I went there I think I might have gone there to pick him up, I can't remember what I was there for exactly. And she was having to explain to her head office that the foot traffic in the store was up, but the sales were not because people were coming in to see Mittens. Other interesting places he's been to, churches. I mean, universities often a popular place for us just by, we live relatively near to Vic Uni. For those of you, he's been to some speciality shops. Maybe shall I leave it at that? Some bars, tattoo parlours. One of my favourite videos is actually of him. And I think it's at Rogan Vagabond or one of the bars where at late night he's lying on the couch, kind of similar to this, a leather one, and he gets carried off the stage by two people. Being treated like the king that he is, I suppose. Servants carry me very much. So he's certainly had some interesting places he's visited.
Do you worry about his wandering and getting in cars?
Absolutely. Is the short answer to that. But it's a question I get asked and have been asked quite often. As a pet and as a family member, and he really is a family member, right? Of course I worry about him. I've tried, kind of earlier on to, kind of keep him more inside, spoken to specialists about how do you keep a cat from wandering. All of those things are futile, I've learned. He's a free-willed spirit. So of course I worry, but I also take a lot of faith from the fact there's about 60,000 of you looking out for him, which certainly helps. We do live kind of in Wellington where there's a lot of people walking around. And the other thing is, he lives a better quality of life living the life that he lives than being kind of cooped up. And actually, he's unhappy. So during lockdown, he would get grumpy having to stay inside. And my kids, who have been accomplices a few times, have let him out. And obviously you try and do the right thing, keep everybody in as part of COVID, all that type of stuff. And the interesting thing we did actually find during that lockdown is on a couple of times that he did get out, he was very quickly home because he'd wander around and he wouldn't find any people to go and kind of talk to. So it's kind of clear where his interests lie.
Well, the next one's controversial. Has Mittens met Dr. Ashley Bloomfield? And does Mittens consider Ashley stiff competition?
Well, there's a humorous answer to that, I suppose, and a more serious answer. Has he met him? No, except in pictures, clearly, and drawings and various things. It'd be an interesting meeting between the two. I wonder what a health professional would kind of say about as you say, a pet wandering around town and all that type of stuff. Is Ashley Bloomfield serious competition? Well, yes. The polls would suggest it's pretty close, but the reality also is I think there's perhaps a few rules around New Zealand of the Year and who meets the criteria.
Wander on a weekday afternoon in the hopes of glimpsing Mittens. Just asking for a friend. Of
course you are. And there's a few spaces that he does tend to wander a bit more, and those are the places you probably see most on the Facebook page. Buller Street is often a common spot for him, or on that footpath on the way, those stairs on the way to the university. But the reality is if Mittens wants to find you, he will. And I've often, had people message me going, hey, I'm really looking for where Mittens is, blah, blah, blah. I really want to meet him. Where can I go meet him? I'm like, well, look, I don't know where he is. You just got to wander and you get lucky. And the lucky faithful, I suppose, they do.
Do Mittens and Latte get Christmas and birthday presents?
Yes, they do. Although we're probably a bit more serious with that in their early years. So they're part of the family. They tend to get special kind of food type treats or whatever for Christmas or a toy. But we have, for example, bought them nice things for them to sleep in, or one of those scratching posts with a bed on top, and they barely sleep on it, right? Let's be honest. And I think any pet owners or cat owners around here will probably have had a similar experience at home. What they really like most is a box or a place where you don't want them to sit, like you're reading something and they'll sit on that. But yeah, so we do get them kind of a small toy and some of their special food that they like.
how did Mittens react to your children when you first brought them home from hospital?
Also, another lovely story, actually, and kind of something that gives you a real insight, I suppose, into kind of how perceptive animals are. So, when my son was born, we were, kind of at the hospital and then at birth care for a few days, and we brought him home, as you do. Mittens was immediately almost kind of very much, guarding of this young baby being there and, kind of sniff, who is this new person in the household? And actually this really nice thing was, for the first kind of few weeks that our son was in his room by himself, once we'd moved him, he would sleep outside his room on the wooden floor at night, almost like he was keeping guard. So it's, they've always had a really lovely bond, and I think that's a reflection of, we don't often give animals enough credit for how intelligent or perceptive they are, and then that really showed that to me.
Can you describe what it feels like for you and others in the family to see videos and photos of Mittens in other people's cars, beds and homes?
Yeah, well, look, I think Mittens gets photographed or videoed a lot, right? Now, I think lots of pets will go into other people's houses, they're just often not caught in the act, so to speak. So does it worry me, or how do I react when I see him in somebody else's house? I'm like, well, look, he's just exploring, and I know that he'll, when he wants to get out, he'll make it known that he wants to get out, and he will get out. I do worry a bit more about the cars, as I've said, and I think, again, I do have a lot of faith in the broader community, I suppose, that they do the right thing and whatever else, because he can tend to sit kind of under a window or something where it's like, oh, this is quite nice and cozy. So it does worry me, but I think everyone understands the important role of a pet, and Mittens is well enough known in Wellington, that invariably what happens is they sit there in their car, they wait until Mittens is ready to move, which really just shows, they say, what do they say? They've dogs have masters and cats have slaves, I think is how the saying goes, and there's never a truer example of that than in some of those posts.
What do your kids think about Mittens' fame, and happy birthday to your 4-year-old daughter today?
Thank you. Yes, so I did actually come from my daughter's 4-year-old birthday party. She was very excited this morning, so hopefully she'll have a good sleep this afternoon. So what do my kids think of it? Well, the kids don't really understand. My son is 5 and my daughter is 4. They don't, I suppose, have a... They don't understand the concept, and frankly, it's hard enough for us to kind of really grasp, kind of what this all means. But a more interesting example, I suppose, is one day we were at the big exhibition here early on, and my daughter, was watching, one of the video clips on screen, and there was another child also here, 5 or 6 year old, and she goes to this girl, "That's my cat. He's at my house," and this other girl goes, "No." And my daughter got very upset that somebody would challenge her that this was her cat. So that they have some understanding that Mittens is known to people, and I don't really know what they make of this kind of exhibition and that type of stuff. At the end of the day, he's just a family pet, for them who happens to be a bit famous. He leaves in the morning, he comes home in the afternoon, and and he's often sleeping on their beds at night. So, but they have a very special, I think most kids have a special bond with whatever animal you have in the house. And in that I would say it's pretty similar. One day when they're a bit older, my son might look back on that ceremony with the mayor and kind of get a comprehension of what that actually was. But for right now, he was just, on best behaviour and kind of just taking it all in, I think.
Okay, so last question from the group. Does Mittens have a girlfriend? And has he ever fathered a litter of kittens?
Well, so there's I suppose 2 parts to that question. The first one, I probably wouldn't really know the honest answer if I did. I think he's definitely a bachelor, but what he gets up to, kind of at night or has done, who knows? Who knows? He doesn't have a girlfriend, I suppose, that I know of. And no, he hasn't fathered a litter of kittens. He has been, as they say, he was treated before we got him when he was a young cat, because otherwise, I'd end up with quite a lot of kittens, I suspect.
Okay, so that's the last of the questions from the group. So has anyone got any questions out in the audience?
Does Mittens, if you say one day you got another cat and Mittens got to know him, do you think Mittens would prefer Latte or the new cat better?
It's a good question, actually. So, and maybe I'll answer that in the way that when we first got Latte, so Mittens was, kind of just over a year old, and Latte has the same mother, but is from a different litter. So I suppose Mittens is, he is reasonably territorial, so there was some challenge, I suppose, there when he first came into the household. They're both boys, and I think, two boys do sometimes tussle, and they have over the years. I think, Mittens protects Latte now, and, I've seen evidence of that. So they have a good close bond. If there was another cat to come in the household, I suspect he'd need to earn his place, and he'd probably know what his pecking order was.
I know he keeps some late nights at times, and just how do you cope if he's not home, say, by 11 o'clock?
Yeah. A fair question. So most of the times he has a pretty kind of steady routine, right? And he leaves in the morning, whatever time it is. It also depends very much on the weather. So, if it's wet, or if he's had a big day the previous day, often he'll stay home. But sometimes, he does stay out a bit later at night. And do I worry? I used to. I still do. I worry if he's not home by the morning, I think is the answer. Because most of the time, sometimes if he isn't home by 10, then I'll get woken up kind of, 2 in the morning or something, and the cat's just climbing on my bed, right? So, he knows the way home. He's done it enough. It's more if he stays away for longer than that I do worry.
Who's next?
I think there were the traffic lights. There's a red car, had the passenger window down, and they were stopped, and Mittens
Across the road?
jumped in the car.
I jumped in the car.
Yeah.
No, I have seen that one, yes.
Yeah. I just wonder what the reaction was to the people in the car if they didn't know who Mittens was.
Yeah, look, I do occasionally get a phone call to go, hey, people don't know who Mittens is, or if, they don't know, somebody else around them usually will. So sometimes I'll get a call and go like, oh, hey, is this your cat? And then they go, and then somebody else has told them on the street, no, don't worry, it's Mittens, right? Or, So there's usually somebody around kind of who knows. And I think, by and large, New Zealand is a wonderful place. And people look out for everyone else. And I think, we've seen that, over the last few years with some of the events that have happened, kind of what a great community it is here. And I think that helps, right? If we lived in a different country somewhere overseas, I'm sure that would not be possible in the same way.
Do you mind sharing Mittens with the rest of us? It seems very generous of you to do this.
Do I mind? No, I suppose. I think Mittens has the best quality of life living it the way that he wants to live it. I think some ways, as I say, me trying to keep him home or whatever would be somewhat selfish. And, if you look at the impact that he's had on this community, the fact that you're all here today just tells you how much he means to all these different people. I've had some extraordinary lovely messages. I had this message from a lady in Colombia. Her father has dementia. He's 80 years old. And the one thing he looks forward to every day is seeing what Mittens has been up to. And you get the... And you listen to that and you go, well, how could I not share him, kind of with the world?
Who's next? Oh, one over here.
When's Mittens' birthday?
One that's been asked often, and I have actually wondered about whether I should share that or not, because then you might end up with it's in September. How about I'll give you that. So it's just been. It was kind of more towards the start of the month, but yeah, so his birthday in September. And before you ask, lattes in February.
Any more?
To know what the naughtiest thing Mittens has done.
Again, noting that there is some, young people in the audience here. Maybe I'll describe it in some vague terms. He went to a place where people go late at night, where there may be sparkly disco balls and a few other things. And he came in without his collar. So make of that what you will.
Anybody else?
What's the furthest distance that Mittens has travelled away from his house?
Look, it's probably a bit hard to measure, but probably 1.5 kilometres or so, and actually that's not far in cat terms. So cats can often roam. It depends very much, I think, whether they're neutered or not. If male cats are unneutered, they can go like 10 k's, but kind of within 2 k's or so is probably a fair kind of range as to where he does wander. So it's not actually that far. It just there's a lot of stuff, say, between, kind of where I live and Te Papa, right? Even though in a straight line it's not actually, kind of that far. And there's obviously a lot of people along the way.
Oh no, I was just going to ask, do you know where he is at the moment?
No. Although I know approximately. He was home this morning. And then he wandered off. So I assume if he hasn't popped up on a Facebook page, he tends to be either in kind of one of our neighbours' houses or that kind of stuff, lying somewhere in the sun. And he does have a very predictable kind of pattern. Cats sleep something like 16 hours a day on average, I think. So whilst he's maybe visible on the streets for a period, what he tends to do is he tends to wander somewhere, then hole up until kind of 4 o'clock, and then wander back home.
Yes, I was just wondering, sometimes, of course, with all the following he now has, whether sometimes he gets tired of the attention, and if he does he just wander off into a bush somewhere?
Look, I think, does he get tired of the attention? If he doesn't want to meet people, cats are extremely good at hiding. And they can go places we can't because they're very agile and climb up on things high. So I know sometimes he does, effectively retreat somewhere to have a snooze or whatever else. So the answer to that is yes, right? He does retreat when he's had enough.
Any more? Oh, down the front, Violet. She'll leave it with me.
Hi, we were wandering down Mill Street and we were amazed about the amount of shops who've got cats' beds for mittens, so we know where he goes and sleeps.
Yeah, look, certain streets he does tend to sell, what is it? It's the Salvation Army, I think, on Willow Street. He's often there.
And he goes down there and spends out in the shop for mittens. Yeah,
it's very nice, isn't it? And then, look, that's a great part of the community here, right? I think, Wellington has a lovely community feel to it. And the fact that it's been embraced like this just tells you, kind of what a city we live in.
Did he wander like this when you were in Auckland, or was it just sort of different?
He did, to a degree. We didn't live as centrally there. I would get a call from the local New World, and he'd be in the store manager's office, or there's the local veggie grocers or that kind of stuff. So he did wander as well. I mean, I think kind of Auckland Auckland's laid out differently. And I think that makes a big difference here. There's so many people in Wellington who walk, which I think is a great thing, whereas in Auckland everybody's are really in their car, and it wasn't as central. And the other thing is, the student community here is very large near where we are based. And students spend a lot of time on social media, so I'm sure that had a contributing factor.
Last question. Last one. Anyone?
Does Mittens prefer people or animals?
And I think he prefers people. We have Latte obviously at home, and they're at times inseparable. At other times they have a tussle. But the point I suppose that really brought it home for me is during COVID, when he did escape during the lockdown, he would come home quickly because he wasn't meeting people on the streets. Right? He was he's very much a people cat, and you know, again, as the saying goes, you know, cats have slaves.
Thank you so much, Silvio. That's all we've got time for now. But it's been a very cat-tastic insight into the very floofy and famous cat about town. I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves. We will be working on editing the video over the next few weeks so that all those Mittens fans overseas and worldwide can hear about this session we've had today. So thank you once again, Matiwa.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for coming.